Eli, first let's talk about what we think we know or speculate about what's going to happen. And let's start with what we do know, which is what President Trump recently said about this report. This is what he said.
Should the Mueller report be released while you're abroad next week?
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General. He's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him.
So, Eli, if you couldn't hear that, the question was, is it going to be released while you're out of the country next week when he's going over to Hanoi? At least it seems we have a president now who believes in his attorney general, which we haven't had for some time.
Well, that's right. And I think it's still a matter. I mean, we still have to see exactly what will be released. The one thing I would say is that any expectation from the White House that there would be a report that would somehow shield any embarrassing details of people in Trump world not getting out to the public, I think is very much misplaced. We've seen that at critical times, even though Mueller has kept a very tight ship, information like this does get out, and there are too many people who have an interest in it getting out. So my hope is that we will see everything there is to see at this point, and finally put an end to this state of suspended speculation about Trump and Russia.
Well, and Tim, at the same time, this new Attorney General, Mr. Barr, has had this job before. He doesn't really need this job, and he tends to be conservative, no question about that, but he's a very well-respected lawyer, so it's not going to be in his interest to play cutesy with this.
Well, and he has, a long-term relationship with Bob Mueller. I think both of them have great respect for one another. I think it's interesting to note when Bob Barr was George H.W. Bush's Attorney General, he was there when Lawrence Walsh was conducting the Iran-Contra investigation, and he ultimately advised Bush to pardon some of the senior people in that to keep it from moving further into the Oval Office, and that put an end to it. It'll be interesting to see if that's the game plan on this. But I think in terms of whether or not Bob Barr is going to sit on this report, I think that's where it really push comes to shove on this one. How much will the Congress see? How much of it will be made public? The reports have suggested that Barr wants to make some sort of an executive summary available to Congress. I don't anticipate Congress is going to be happy with an executive summary. I think they're going to want to see the whole thing.
Well, in fact, in the confirmation hearings for Bob Barr up on the Hill, he said he'd give only out the summary. But as a practical matter, is that going to work with this Congress, Eli?
I don't think it's going to work with a Democratic House, and I think that there is also enough of an interest in having a more public and robust report from even Republicans. And keep in mind that I think at this point, both sides of this debate have an interest in seeing as much getting out there. I mean, we know that the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who's far less partisan than his House counterpart, has said he has yet to see evidence of collusion. That's been debated by other Democrats on the committee. But there is a sense that Mueller has not found at least evidence of the original conspiracy crime that we were all so worried about in 2016 after Trump was elected. So we'll see what he has there.
So, Eli, one of the things that strikes me about this is we started about whether there was any relationship or not with the Russian government with respect to the election. It's turned several times, including in focusing on the FBI. Sometimes it feels like the FBI has taken more damage than President Trump has throughout this investigation. We now have Mr. McCabe out there with a new book saying various things. Is the FBI to be held accountable here? Have they gone too far? Have they overreached?
Well, the Mueller report is not going to be talking about the FBI. I believe the Justice Department has begun some kind of investigation into the FBI's handling of this. I think it's through the Inspector General. And we'll have to wait for that. And of course, there has been intense congressional oversight, and Senator Lindsey Graham has said that he'd like to do oversight in that regard. And a lot of these facts have gone out. But I think, as somebody who has been critical of the FBI, don't underestimate a lot of the embarrassing information that has come out against Trump through the Mueller process. I mean, we now know that the president shielded from the public and lied about the fact that he was pursuing a Trump Tower deal in Moscow for not only into the campaign, but perhaps past the election itself. I think that if that information had come out all at once during the election, it would have been its own kind of scandal. But in some ways, because Trump says a lot of things that are pretty outrageous, we've had a bit of scandal fatigue. So I wouldn't necessarily say that you would say that one is worse than the other. But I do think that both are worthy of kind of scrutiny at this point.
Yeah, but one of the interesting things, for me, Tim, at least, is the information that has come out of the Mueller probe has come out through indictments and plea agreements and convictions.
And leaks from, I think, some of the defendants' attorneys. I think some of the early leaks were from them.
But not from the Mueller investigation,
No,
as far as we can tell at all.
He's a by-the-books prosecutor. I think his team has been his team has been very tight-lipped about all of this. I think the thing to remember is that this investigation began before McCabe or Mueller got involved in terms of overseeing it. I think there's parts of it that have been handed off to other jurisdictions. The Southern District of New York is still going to be investigating some of the financial issues that Mueller may have chosen not to pursue. So those are going to be very live and present issues for the president, regardless of what happens with the Mueller investigation. And the fact pattern around the Mueller investigation, what we've seen in the sentencing memos and what we've seen in paperwork that comes out, I think transcends these issues about the FBI's behavior, although it's always worth scrutinizing whether the FBI is being above board.
Eli, does this approach work at all? I mean, in our constitutional form of government, can the executive branch, even a delegate from the executive branch, investigate the President of the United States for these sorts of charges? Or isn't this really the Congress's responsibility under the impeachment power, ultimately?
I think that Congress has a responsibility under impeachment, but also the more normal way is through elections to sort these matters out. But in some ways, we'll see with the conclusion of this whether we can have this model going forward. Because, I think that it would really say something that if Mueller came up with something and said explicitly in some sort of report and, sort of back this up, that we were looking for evidence of a conspiracy regarding the stolen emails and Russia's overall effort to influence the 2016 election with the Trump campaign and those around Trump, and we did not find that, or something along those lines, then in some ways it would be an argument against interest, because everybody kind of, the caricature of Mueller, I should say, painted by Trump, was that he was, dogged and would find something, that he was, the kind of a Soviet style, you find the man, I'll find the crime. If he comes out and says that, we looked into it and we didn't find it, that actually might bode well for future special counsels. But so far, we've historically not had, I think, great success with this kind of thing. It can turn into a sort of endless investigation, and it can, in many ways, really cloud our political process, because a question that should be for Congress, impeachment, or the voters in elections, is almost sort of fobbed off to somebody as a special prosecutor. And I think in some ways that's an abdication of congressional responsibility.
And Tim, finally, you have followed Donald Trump, the person, for many years. You've written about him extensively. Do you believe that Donald Trump knows what is likely to come out in the Mueller report? And can you read anything into his conduct or his statements right now would indicate this is what he thinks is coming?
Well, I think, the people who the Mueller investigation ultimately targets probably know more than other people about what's at work, because they're being asked questions about it. Trump certainly knows the questions that have come into the White House counsel's office. I also think the fact that he tweets repeatedly over 2 years now at both Mueller, the FBI, and the investigation itself suggests that he feels defensive about this. I think if he had nothing to worry about this whole process, he wouldn't be tweeting at it as often as he is. He wouldn't be doing things that appear overtly to be obstruction of justice in order to stem the tide. And I think that comes back to this whole process. Yes, this should be in Congress's hands or in voters' hands, but voters and Congress need to know what to look at, and you need some sort of a body to just get at the fact pattern here. The Congress itself has said we're not able to begin an impeachment proceeding unless we know what Mueller has. Somebody has to do an investigation like this.